Okay, let's get the ball rolling with our very first guest. We now have Jonathan Jackson, the Director of Sales Engineering, APJ from BlackBerry. Now, Jonathan is a staunch advocate of data protection and privacy, and he brings over 2 decades of tactical experience in the architecture, development, and management of secure, scalable systems. Jonathan has been with BlackBerry for 7 years and was the head of security advisory for ANZ before assuming his current role. Joining us today, all the way from Australia, let's all welcome Jonathan Jackson on board as the first presenter of Spot On.
Welcome to my session at the Cyber Attack Conference for Singapore 2020. My name is Jonathan Jackson. I am the Director of Sales Engineering for BlackBerry, APAC and Japan. And today my session is going to be covering off a piece of threat intelligence that we've recently released to the global threat community, threat research community, which is around the BAHAMUT threat actor and threat group. So in terms of why we do threat intelligence and what we do at BlackBerry, there are really 2 main things. One of them is to educate the wider group, the wider community, is also to inspire others in terms of some of the capabilities that we have and how we work with other groups as well. So enterprises and governments use our information, tactical raw intelligence, indicators of compromise or IOCs, to help them, better protect themselves in terms of stopping threats at a SOC level, a CM level, or with their IT security teams. And then also, organizations, will use this type of information and threat research for things like, strategic managing risk, business continuity planning, strategic discussions as it pertains to cyber risk. So in terms of BAHAMUT themselves, I'm going to be covering a couple of salient areas for you today. We'll cover off an overview. We'll look at some of their targeting capabilities, some of their tradecraft, and then we'll look at some of the attribution techniques, attribution to this group. So in terms of an overview, we're going to be looking at a group that we think, and we've seen recently, as one of the most elusive, patient, and effective public known threat actors that are out there. Effectively a hacker for hire group, incredibly well funded, no question. Their techniques and capabilities are really, really impressive. So from a threat research perspective, something that we haven't really seen much of before. So I'll be covering off that. And then in terms of their targeting, highly disparate targeting techniques. We're looking at individuals, companies, high net worth individuals at corporations, government agencies, human rights groups, political activist groups, mostly in South Asia and in the Gulf. We've also seen targets across Europe, Africa, and also in East Asia, specifically really in China. Their tradecraft, as I mentioned, incredibly well funded, and their tradecraft covers off a number of different techniques, mainly around elaborate phishing and credential harvesting capabilities. We've seen hundreds of new Windows malware samples being created. Definitely have the ability to be using zero-day exploits. So they've probably got a number of people in their organization are good at 0 days. Very elaborate and capable with anti-forensic and antivirus or AV evasion tactics. Prolific with regards to fake mobile applications, iOS and Android, which I'll cover off in a little bit more detail and show you some of those. And then we've also seen numerous fake websites, fake social media accounts that are leveraged as part of their overall campaigns and tactics. In terms of attaching BAHAMUT to some attribution, very difficult to do. What we've done is we've looked over research over the last number of years, back to 2016 and beyond, and I'll go through some of the other researchers who found this group and named really by Bellingcat in 2016. Ourselves actually at BlackBerry at Cylance, we did a lot of research on this group back in 2018 and actually named them the White Company. But now we've correlated a number of different capabilities in this group, and we know that they are now called BAHAMUT. So in terms of their targeting, as I mentioned, clustered around mainly two different main areas, South Asia and the Gulf. They are highly precise in terms of their targeting. So specific individuals, government agencies, military agencies we've seen as well, corporations, and in lots of different numerous verticals. So tends to suggest a hack for hire group. It's probably not a nation state group, but there are some breadcrumbs there, which will definitely help you. And we've, in part of the comprehensive report that we released in October this year, well, if you're interested in this type of topic, we'll definitely give you some insight in terms of, some of the exploits we found, some of the breadcrumbs that we found very, very interesting. As I mentioned, our research, confirms previous findings from others, and I'll give some attribution later on in my presentation. So as a key takeaway to BAHAMUT Group, highly disparate, targeting different myriad of different verticals, geographic regions across the world, suggesting a mercenary hack-for-hire group acting in the interests of multiple sponsors who are probably incredibly well-funded and potentially ex-military, we think. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen and just show you some of the tradecraft that this team uses. So let me just quickly share my screen here. So I will quickly do that, and I'll share that. Okay, there we go. Hopefully you can see my screen now. So in terms of tradecraft and attribution, as I mentioned, let's go through some of their capabilities. So, their operational security is above average. They are very, very hard to track down. This is a very, very well organized group, or hacking for hire group. Phishing, malware infrastructure is the phishing and malware infrastructure is kept separate at all times. It changes incredibly frequently. If they get found out, they will drop domains. They will change IP addressing very, very quickly. Their campaigns they watch carefully, and they're very, very agile in terms of the way that they can manage themselves. They use some malware. Is not really used. They use it as a last resort, but this is obviously often publicly available malware. We've seen quite a bit of Cobalt Strike in this one. They're also known to reuse tools from other threat groups, or APTs. Anti-analysis features, it says they're built into their exploit code, which is it bypasses a lot, and obviously we'll spend a bit of time on iOS and Android in terms of the fake applications as well. Definitely aim at the mobile devices. They see that as a big vulnerability and an area of weakness for corporations, governments, or their targets. So their campaigns are largely aimed around mobile devices, and they are very patient. We've seen them and known to watch for more than a year before they actually deliver a campaign. The big thing about BAHAMUT is around their fake empire, fake news sites, websites, social media accounts, etc. And then we'll also have a look at some of their fake assets, and how they actually deliver a very, very well thought out and put together credential harvesting and phishing campaign. So I mentioned their fake websites. So, this is a website which was previously called TechSprouts, originally a legitimate website, no question, pretty good content around, InfoSec news, etc. The domain seemed to go fairly quiet for a while, and then it looks like it's now been taken over by this BAHAMUT group. Their content now includes, geopolitical updates, research into, IT and security news. Also, somewhat ironically, hack for hire groups, of which obviously this group is themselves. Their content is original, comes out frequently, and definitely, it says the contributes there are almost surely fake. They definitely are fake. They use images and screen grabs from other domains, taking over things like local news anchors to make a degree of legitimacy look like from a website perspective. As I mentioned, iOS and Android fake applications, malware apps, and other more vulnerable than just malware. So we found 5 apps in the Google Play Store. Obviously, we've worked very closely with both Google and Apple to help them remediate these apps out of them. But each of these apps, credible amount of detail to things like each app comes with its own dedicated website. all the way through to the privacy policies, the T's and C's, how the app works, etc. We also found 7 apps, Android anyway, outside of the Play Store for side loading, which is obviously a big concern. Some of those apps are still out there. Some of the apps were geo-fenced to specific areas. We're looking at some Sikh separatist groups, Kashmiri groups, which were targets for some of these apps, and obviously those were geo-fenced to specific regions around the world. We've made the connection back to BAHAMUT on these based on historic C2 that we see in other research that we've done ourselves, as well as what others have done. And then also have a unique service, network fingerprint they leverage, as well as some fairly unique cryptography, encryption and decryption techniques. And these apps have obviously got malicious functions, credential harvesting, keylogging, stealing of photographs, SMSs, contact lists, emails, etc., etc. On the iOS side, as I mentioned, also weren't left alone, so had to work with Apple to get 9 fake apps out of the App Store. Again, similar to Android, exceptional attention to detail, T's and C's, websites, etc. This one here, Spam Master, meant to help you and stop you from getting rid of all your unwanted phone calls and SMSs. And I can promise you, it does completely the opposite to that. As I mentioned there, in terms of their tradecraft, overall, though, above average in comparison. I don't want to sound like a fanboy, but in threat research, I guess we've got to take our hats off to the competition to a certain degree. These guys definitely know what they're doing, and they're some of the best we've come across most recently. Extensive recon of targets, especially with regards to their phishing campaigns. And then also obviously leveraging heavily around the whole sort of fake assets, fake news, fake apps, fake persona, personally identifiable, PII information, etc., etc. Very well, very good at the use of Twitter by example. And we've also got in the report details a lot of the social media activities that this group leverages to be able to get their phishing campaigns going. Speed, no question, very, very fast. Spear phishing campaigns are up for months, weeks, days, and in some cases, with a specific individual, unfortunately, was it just up for just a couple of hours. There's also, as I mentioned before, very, very well, and probably takes them a huge amount of time from a compartmentalization perspective. So everything is separated. The infrastructure along their different campaigns, as soon as one gets picked up, gets torn down really, really quickly. So very hard to assign attribution to this group. As I mentioned before, the use of malware tends to be at a last resort from a credential harvesting perspective, but they have developed their own malware for Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. With Windows and Mac, often it's it's reused open source malware from other APT groups, but they do definitely have some zero-day capabilities within BAHAMUT in terms of this organization. And also, as I mentioned before, very good at anti-analysis and AV evasion TTPs. So to summarize, in terms of where we're at, very different views of the same sea monster. BAHAMUT is actually originally a name attributed to a mythological deep sea monster. And the idea of this being that they are dark and can never be found. Originally, we think it's the name, but unnamed by Kaspersky's in the zero-day in-page research that they put out. And then further along, Bellingcat in 2016, first description of this group. And then others have also found it from Trend Micro, Bitdefender, and Cisco as well. Cisco did some pretty good research on this group as it pertains to mobile MDM and applications that leverage MDM payloads and the ability to be able to deploy malicious apps to mobile devices without the users knowing. So definitely the same group, same fingerprint, same C2, etc., etc. And even ourselves at BlackBerry, previously Cylance, we talked about this as this group as the white company. If you're interested, the full report, there is a link to it to go and download it. It's extensive, it's comprehensive, it lists you all the the SHAs you need, or the IP addresses, the domains, all the tactics, the TTPs, etc., that this group go through. So if you're interested in this type of research, then please feel free to either download the report or follow us along on the BlackBerry Threat Vector blog, where we put out this sort of information fairly frequently. We are aware, actually, BAHAMUT are putting out a new campaign, which we're just working on. We hope to release that information in the next couple of weeks, but we typically do this sort of threat research once a quarter, depending on how we go from a resourcing perspective and what's happening in the industry. So thank you very much from my perspective. I hope you've enjoyed today's session on an overview of the BAHAMUT group. My email address is up there. Find me on LinkedIn, and also, as I mentioned before, the report is via the BlackBerry Threat Vector blog. So enjoy the rest of your summit, and we'll open up for questions and answers now. So over to you, moderator.
Thank you for the presentation, Jonathan. Now, curators, the floor is open for your questions. Who's going to go first?
I can go first. Thanks, Jonathan. So with research like this, what BlackBerry to do? Is fight back or hack back?
Fight back or hack back? So that's a very difficult question to answer. So, from a vendor perspective, obviously, I'm an ex-attacker, so I would love to attack back. Unfortunately, though, it's against the law in a number of countries. That being said, though, what this research does and gives the threat intelligence community is the tools and techniques that you can use to be able to protect yourself. So, your vendors, whether you're a CISO, government agency, even, I dare say, nation states themselves, can use reports like this on BAHAMUT to be able to protect themselves. But certainly from a BlackBerry perspective, we don't encourage hacking back because we're not actually allowed to. We would rather just give the threat community the intelligence required.
Who's next?
Thank you.
Hey, Jonathan. Mac here. Where does the intel came from? Where do you gather it? Does it come from your endpoint solution, or do you have any incident response capability that provides you the intel?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Mac, for the question. Good one. So this, as I mentioned in the presentation, and the report actually started way back in sort of 2016 in terms of gathering the intel. Also 2018 really made some big inroads in terms of some of the TTPs that are being used. A lot of other groups, as I mentioned as well, have provided what we call the breadcrumbs to be able to get this information out. That being said, it's not just about intel. At BlackBerry, obviously, we do have our own compromise assessment and IR capabilities. And, we've seen unfortunately, a number of customers across South Asia region, the Gulf, really struggling with this group. And, that's led us to dig further in this and look at some of their techniques, their tactics, the IOCs, etc., for us to be able to pin this down into this group. So, to answer your question, it's not just one piece of research, but it is something that BlackBerry does on a continuous basis.
Thank you. I have a question as well, Jonathan. Essentially, the rise of threats via compromised mobile devices and apps is a real concern. What role do third-party app stores play here compared to Google and Apple Store?
Okay, thank you. Another good question. So it's a very challenging world. I mean, I think, back to some of the panel sessions I've been hearing from today, people are talking about the threat footprint expanding, right? COVID challenges, everybody's now working from home. On mobile devices, look, the reality is it's the first thing we pick up when we get up in the morning, and it's probably the last thing we put down when we go to bed at night, right? So mobile is pervasive. The challenge being is that the attackers know this as well, right? So a very easy way in is through a vulnerable mobile device. Apple and Google have an incredibly difficult job. There is no question. They have some of the best, or if not the best, threat mitigation strategies and capabilities within their organizations to stop things like, vulnerable mobile applications coming into their app store. That being said, this research, we've found, a number of apps, both on Android and on iOS, which are susceptible. They do get through. Some of these apps, and in this case with BAHAMUT, are very, very cleverly done. The end user license agreement, the EULA, the websites, the fictitious and fake websites that they put up for these apps look absolutely perfect. And in most cases, they do what they say on the tin, right? They look like a completely stock standard app. Only later on, when they start to initiate some changes in coding in the application, that we start to see things like credential harvesting, phishing type capability, key logging type, C2 type commands happening on these applications. So Google and Apple for sure have very, very big challenges, and we work very closely with them to be able to help them. Your question though is about third-party app stores. I would highly recommend that nobody ever stores an app from a third-party app store. It's impossible to police, and it's impossible to stop the threats that are happening on your device. Apple itself, though, is obviously a lot more of a walled garden operating system. It's much harder to get in there. Android, obviously, with APKs, you can do, and there are a lot of third-party app stores. It's pretty clear to us, though, at BlackBerry, that this group, BAHAMUT, have got some very, very good Android and iOS developers who really know what they're doing and are able to bypass the security, vulnerability scanners that we have out there in app stores. And that's why it's incredibly important to look at additional technologies that are going to be scanning your mobile apps to make sure that they are actually doing what they're doing and they're not stealing your credentials and performing really, really big harm, which is what this group is able to do.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Any last piece of advice?
Yes, I'll just go on further to say this threat research is continuing. So we're going to be putting out another report on another group, very similar, probably nation state, possibly ex-military, most definitely a hack for hire group. So if you're interested in this type of threat research, if it can help you stay safe in a very chaotic cyber world, then we're always welcome to dialogue. We're here to help the threat community, and so please just engage with us, and we're here to help you be safer in this world. So thank you for your time today. Great questions, guys.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Jonathan. Up next, we have Will Capcio, Security Solutions Engineer from HackerOne. His primary focus is on empowering government agencies and enterprise organizations to run successful bug bounty and disclosure programs in order to help make the internet more secure. Will is currently based in the US, and like Jonathan, he'll be joining us virtually.